Diana Chen adjusted her oversized sunglasses for the third time in 5 minutes, pretending to read the lunch menu at the Phoenician Resort's poolside restaurant. The Arizona sun blazed overhead, casting dancing shadows through the palm fronds, but she barely noticed the heat. What she did notice was the man at the corner table who kept glancing her way when he thought she wasn't looking. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She'd been coming to this same spot every Thursday for the past 2 months, treating herself to a solitary lunch as part of what her therapist called reclaiming your space. At 52, Diana was learning to navigate a world she hadn't inhabited in over 25 years. The world of being single, being seen, being noticed. The divorce papers had been finalized just 6 months ago, and everything still felt foreign, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. The man was attractive in that polished, successful way that reminded her uncomfortably of her ex-husband. Dark hair with distinguished silver at the temples, expensive watch catching the sunlight, the kind of confident posture that spoke of boardrooms and important decisions. But there was something different about the way he looked at her. Not predatory or dismissive, but genuinely curious, almost appreciative. Diana caught her reflection in the glass door behind her and winced slightly. The woman staring back was undeniably middle-aged, crow's feet visible even behind the sunglasses, her once thick black hair now showing threads of silver she'd stopped, dyeing 3 months ago in an act of defiance that still surprised her. The red sundress she'd chosen that morning suddenly felt too young, too hopeful. When she looked back, he was definitely staring now, not even trying to hide it. Their eyes met across the patio, and instead of looking away like she normally would have, something rebellious sparked inside her. Maybe it was the 3 months of yoga teacher training that had given her a new relationship with her body. Maybe it was the small but growing success of her online wellness platform that nobody in her old life knew about. Or maybe she was just tired of apologizing for taking up space in the world. Before she could talk herself out of it, Diana stood up and walked directly to his table. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her chin up and her stride confident. The man looked genuinely surprised as she approached, setting down his phone and giving her his full attention. "Excuse me," Diana said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I couldn't help but notice you staring." She paused, letting the moment stretch between them. "At 52, do I still have it?" The question hung in the desert air like a challenge. She watched his face cycle through surprise, embarrassment, and then something that looked like admiration. This wasn't how proper divorced women were supposed to behave, especially not women her age, especially not in broad daylight at the most exclusive resort in Scottsdale. "I'm sorry," he said, standing quickly and extending his hand. "Marcus Thompson. And yes, absolutely. Yes, you definitely still have it." His smile was genuine, a little sheepish. "I was being rude, but I have to say, your confidence in calling me out on it is incredibly attractive." Diana felt a flush of satisfaction that had nothing to do with his compliment and everything to do with her own boldness. "Diana Chen?" she replied, shaking his hand. "And thank you for being honest instead of pretending you weren't looking." "Would you like to join me?" Marcus gestured to the empty chair across from him. "I promise to maintain appropriate eye contact." As Diana settled into the chair, she felt a strange sensation, like stepping into a version of herself she'd never tried on before. The old Diana would have hurried away after catching someone staring, would have spent the rest of the day wondering what was wrong with her appearance. This Diana was apparently willing to walk up to strange men and demand acknowledgement of her attractiveness. "So what brings you to the Phoenician on a Thursday afternoon?" Marcus asked, signaling the server for another menu. "Freedom," Diana answered without thinking, then laughed at her own honesty. "Sorry, that probably sounds dramatic. I'm recently divorced, and I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by someone else's expectations. Marcus nodded with understanding that seemed genuine. Not dramatic at all. I'm going through something similar myself. Divorce was finalized 8 months ago. They talked easily for the next hour, the conversation flowing between light topics and surprising depths. Marcus owned a commercial real estate development company, had 2 teenage kids who lived with their mother, and admitted to feeling completely lost in the dating world after 20 years of marriage. Diana found herself sharing more than she'd intended about her own journey. The yoga certification she'd pursued to reclaim her body, the online wellness platform she'd started almost by accident, the way her daughter Sophie had initially been, mortified by her mother's midlife crisis behavior. "What kind of wellness platform?" Marcus asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Diana hesitated. She'd been deliberately vague about her online presence with everyone from her old life, partly from embarrassment and partly from a protective instinct she didn't fully understand. It started as a blog about rediscovering yourself after major life changes, yoga, meditation, nutrition, that sort of thing. It's turned into something bigger than I expected. She didn't mention the 50,000 followers, the brand partnerships she'd started receiving, or the fact that she was making more money from her laptop in her modest Tempe townhouse than she'd ever imagined possible. Those details felt too vulnerable to share with a stranger, no matter how charming. The afternoon sun had shifted by the time Diana realized they'd been talking for over 2 hours. Marcus checked his watch and grimaced. "I have a 4 o'clock meeting I can't miss, but I'd love to see you again. Would you be interested in dinner this weekend?" Diana felt that flutter of excitement she'd almost forgotten existed. "I'd like that." As they exchanged numbers, Marcus hesitated. "Can I ask you something? What made you decide to approach me instead of just ignoring the staring?" Diana considered the question seriously. "I spent 25 years making myself smaller, quieter, more convenient for everyone else. I guess I'm done with that." She smiled. "Besides, at 52, I figure I've earned the right to ask for what I want to know." Walking back to her car, Diana felt lighter than she had in months. She'd taken a risk, put herself out there, and it had paid off. The old Diana would have spent the drive home analyzing every word of the conversation, looking for signs that she'd said something wrong or embarrassed herself. This Diana just felt proud. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into her driveway. Text from Marcus. "Thank you for the most interesting afternoon I've had in years. Looking forward to Saturday." Diana smiled as she typed back, "Thank you for seeing me." It wasn't until she was inside her townhouse, making her afternoon tea, that she realized how significant those words were. For the first time in longer than she could remember, someone had really seen her. Not as a wife, not as a mother, not as an extension of someone else's life, but as Diana. 52, confident, and apparently still capable of surprising herself. She had no idea that across town, Marcus was telling his business partner about the fascinating woman he'd met, or that his ex-wife Victoria would overhear every word. She had no idea that her decision to be bold at a resort lunch would set in motion a chain of events that would test everything she thought she knew about herself, about power, and about what it really meant to start over. All Diana knew was that for the first time in her adult life, she felt like the main character in her own story, and she couldn't wait to see what happened next. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of desert sunset that painted the Phoenix, sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Diana stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying on her third outfit of the evening. The black dress felt too formal. The casual jeans seemed too young, and now she was second-guessing the navy blue wrap dress that had looked perfect 20 minutes ago. Her phone rang, and Rachel's name flashed on the screen. Diana's best friend had been her lifeline through the divorce, the one person who understood the complexity of rebuilding an identity after decades of being half of a couple. "Please tell me you're not chickening out," Rachel said without preamble. "I'm not chickening out," Diana replied, though she was adjusting the neckline for the fourth time. "I'm just calibrating." Calibrating is code for overthinking. You look amazing, the dress is perfect, and you deserve to have a wonderful evening with an attractive man who clearly appreciates you. Diana smiled despite her nerves. Rachel had a way of cutting through her self-doubt with surgical precision. "What if I've forgotten how to do this? What if I'm terrible at dating now?" "Then you'll learn. That's what this whole phase of your life is about, remember? Discovery, not perfection." After Rachel hung up, Diana took one final look in the mirror. The woman looking back was polished but not trying too hard, confident but not overdone. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and the wrap dress accentuated her figure in a way that felt both comfortable and attractive. The yoga training had given her a new appreciation for her body's strength rather than just its appearance, and it showed in the way she carried herself. Marcus had suggested Kaya Bistro, an upscale Asian fusion restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale. Diana arrived exactly on time, a habit from her married days that she couldn't seem to shake. She spotted Marcus immediately at a corner table, and her stomach did a small flip. He looked even better than she remembered, wearing a charcoal gray button-down that brought out his eyes. He stood as she approached, that genuine smile spreading across his face. "Diana, you look absolutely stunning." The evening unfolded like something from a movie she'd watch but never imagine herself starring in. Marcus was attentive without being overwhelming, asking thoughtful questions about her yoga practice and her wellness platform. Unlike her ex-husband, who had always seemed to be mentally composing his next comment while she spoke, Marcus actually listened. "So your online following just grew organically?" he asked, as they shared a plate of perfectly prepared dim sum. Diana nodded, still amazed by her own success. "I started writing about the experience of starting over at 50. I thought maybe a few other divorced women might relate. I never expected it to become what it has." She paused, debating how much to reveal. "I actually have brand partnerships now. Companies that want me to promote their products to women in midlife transitions. That's incredible. You've built something entirely your own." "Arst?" The admiration in his voice was different from anything she'd experienced in her marriage. Her ex-husband had tolerated her interests at best, dismissing them as hobbies rather than recognizing any real value or potential. Marcus seemed genuinely impressed by her entrepreneurial spirit. As the evening progressed, Marcus shared his own story. His ex-wife Victoria had come from old Phoenix money, the kind of family that owned half of Paradise Valley and expected everyone to know their name. The divorce had been bitter, with Victoria wielding her social connections like weapons. "She made it clear that anyone who sided with me would find themselves cut out of certain circles," Marcus explained. "It's amazing how quickly 20 years of friendships can evaporate when there's social pressure involved." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Diana felt a chill of recognition. Her own divorce had cost her several relationships, women who had been her friends but were ultimately more loyal to the status quo than to her personal happiness. The country club crowd? Exactly. Although, honestly, I'm discovering I don't miss it as much as I thought I would. Those relationships were pretty superficial anyway. They talked about their children, both navigating the complexities of co-parenting teenagers who were still adjusting to their parents' new lives. Marcus's son and daughter were protective of their mother, suspicious of any woman their father might date. Diana's daughter Sophie was slowly coming around to her mother's transformation, but still occasionally expressed embarrassment about Diana's reinvention phase. Sophie actually told me last week that seeing me build something of my own has inspired her to think differently about her own career goals, Diana shared. She's studying business at ASU, and she said watching me create something from nothing made her realize she doesn't have to follow traditional paths. That's an incredible gift to give your daughter. You're modeling independence and resilience. The restaurant had begun to empty around them, but neither seemed eager to end the evening. Marcus suggested a walk through the nearby sculpture garden, where they continued their conversation under the desert stars. "Can I ask you something personal?" Diana said as they paused near a bronze fountain. "What made your marriage end?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "We grew apart, but more than that, I realized I'd become someone I didn't recognize. Victoria had very specific ideas about who I should be, what success should look like, how we should present ourselves to the world. Over time, I lost track of what I actually wanted versus what was expected of me." Diana understood that feeling completely. "I spent so many years trying to be the perfect wife that I forgot I was supposed to be a person too." They were standing closer now, the conversation having drawn them together in the intimate way that shared vulnerabilities often do. Marcus reached out and gently touched her arm. "Diana, I want you to know that today was one of the best days I've had in years. Not just because you're beautiful, which you absolutely are, but because you're so genuinely yourself. It's refreshing to be with someone who isn't performing or pretending." The kiss that followed was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as Diana allowed herself to melt into the moment. It had been over a year since anyone had kissed her, and she'd forgotten how it felt to be desired, to be chosen. When they broke apart, Diana felt breathless and slightly dizzy. "I should probably head home," she said, though she didn't want the evening to end. "Of course. Can I walk you to your car?" As they made their way back through the sculpture garden, Diana's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it absently, then stopped walking as she processed what she was seeing. It was from an unknown number, but the message was clear. "Saw you tonight. Some women never learn when to act their age. Enjoy it while it lasts." Marcus noticed her expression immediately. "Everything okay?" Diana showed him the text, watching his face darken as he read it. "Any idea who this might be from?" "No," Diana said, though something about the tone felt familiar. "Probably just some random person with too much time and too little happiness." Marcus looked troubled. "Diana, I hope our being seen together tonight doesn't cause you any problems. My ex-wife has a way of making life difficult for people she perceives as threats." Diana squared her shoulders, that same defiant spirit that had led her to approach Marcus in the first place rising to the surface. "Let her try. I'm not the same woman I was a year ago, and I'm certainly not going to let some bitter stranger dictate how I live my life." But as Marcus walked her to her car and kissed her goodnight, Diana couldn't shake the feeling that the anonymous text was just the beginning. Someone had been watching them tonight, someone who disapproved of her choices and felt entitled to express that disapproval. Driving home through the quiet Scottsdale streets, Diana made a decision. Whatever was coming, whoever was behind that text, she wouldn't let it diminish what she'd built for herself. She'd spent too many years shrinking to fit other people's expectations. If someone wanted to challenge her right to happiness, her right to be seen and desired at 52, they were going to discover just how much fight this newly confident woman had in her. The Diana who had been afraid to take up space was gone. In her place was someone ready to defend the life she was creating, whatever the cost. The morning of the Desert Botanical Garden Charity Gala arrived with the kind of crisp November air that made Phoenix winters legendary. Diana stood in her walk-in closet, which had become her war room over the past 6 weeks. Clothes hung with military precision, each outfit carefully chosen for specific battles in what had become an all-out campaign for her right to exist authentically in her own life. Today's armor was a stunning emerald green silk dress that hugged her curves without apology, paired with the diamond earrings her grandmother had left her. The woman in the mirror looked like someone who belonged at exclusive charity events, someone who commanded respect and attention. More importantly, she looked like herself. Her phone buzzed with a message from James Rodriguez, her attorney who had become something far more valuable than legal counsel. Over the past month and a half, James had transformed from a professional acquaintance into a strategic partner and trusted friend. His message was brief. Everything is in place. Victoria has no idea what's coming. You've got this. Diana smiled, remembering how different she'd felt just 2 months ago when Sterling had first made her move. The anonymous text had been just the beginning. Victoria, Marcus's vindictive ex-wife, had mobilized her considerable social network to systematically destroy Diana's reputation and business. Fake negative reviews had flooded Diana's wellness platform, claiming she was a fraud who preyed on vulnerable divorced women. Rumors had circulated through Scottsdale's elite circles that Diana was a gold digger who had deliberately targeted Marcus for his money. Most devastating had been the coordinated attack on her yoga certification. Victoria had somehow discovered that Diana's training program wasn't affiliated with a major organization and had used her connections to raise questions about Diana's qualifications. Several of Diana's private clients had canceled, and the community center where she taught had received complaints about allowing an unqualified instructor to lead classes. The old Diana might have crumbled under such an assault. She might have retreated, apologized, tried to make herself smaller and less threatening. But this Diana had spent the past 6 weeks doing something Victoria hadn't anticipated. She'd fought back. Working with James, Diana had systematically documented every attack, traced the fake reviews to their sources, and gathered evidence of Victoria's campaign. More importantly, she'd used her online platform to tell her story, sharing her experience of being targeted for daring to start over at 52. The response had been overwhelming. Women from across the country had shared their own stories of being diminished, dismissed, or punished for claiming their own power in midlife. Her follower count had tripled. Major wellness brands had reached out with partnership offers. 3 publishers had contacted her about book deals. What Victoria had intended as destruction had instead become Diana's launching pad to national recognition. But the real masterstroke had been James's suggestion to investigate Victoria's own business dealings. As it turned out, the charity board positions Victoria held so proudly, the social influence she wielded so ruthlessly, were built on a foundation that wouldn't bear scrutiny. Victoria had been using her various nonprofit roles to funnel money to businesses owned by her friends and family members, enriching her inner circle while claiming tax deductions for charitable giving. Diana arrived at the botanical garden as the late afternoon sun cast golden light through the desert plants. The venue was stunning, with string lights woven through the cacti and succulents, creating an enchanted atmosphere among the native flora. This was Victoria's event, her annual showcase of power and influence, where Phoenix's elite gathered to see and be seen while ostensibly supporting environmental education. Marcus was waiting near the entrance, looking handsome in his black tuxedo but visibly nervous. Their relationship had deepened over the past 2 months, forged stronger by the external pressure they'd faced together. He'd stood by her when several of his business associates had distanced themselves, and Diana had seen firsthand the integrity that had attracted her to him initially. "You look absolutely radiant," he said, taking her hand. "Are you ready for this?" "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Diana replied, and she meant it. They entered the garden together, and Diana felt the familiar ripple of attention that had become part of her reality. Some gazes were admiring, others curious, a few openly hostile. She'd learned to navigate this landscape of social judgment with grace and steel. Victoria appeared within minutes, resplendent in a custom-designed black gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She approached with her usual entourage of society women, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Diana," Victoria said, her voice carrying across the gathering. "How brave of you to come tonight. I wasn't sure you'd still be in town." The comment was calculated to suggest that Diana was somehow temporary, insignificant, someone who might simply disappear if ignored long enough. Diana had anticipated this exact approach. "Victoria," Diana replied warmly, projecting the kind of confidence that came from knowing she held the winning hand. What a lovely event! The botanical garden is the perfect setting for celebrating growth and resilience. Some plants thrive even in the harshest conditions. Victoria's smile flickered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. Indeed. Though I've always found that weeds, no matter how pretty, eventually show their true nature. The women with Victoria tittered appreciatively, clearly enjoying what they perceived as their leader putting an upstart in her place. Diana maintained her serene expression, drawing on months of meditation practice and the deep well of strength she'd discovered within herself. Speaking of true nature, Diana said, reaching into her elegant clutch, I wanted to thank you personally for inspiring my latest blog post. It's been incredibly popular. She handed Victoria a printed copy of the article she'd published that morning, titled, When Women Tear Down Women, a Case Study in Midlife Bullying. Victoria took the paper with obvious reluctance, her eyes scanning the first few paragraphs. Diana watched as comprehension dawned, followed by a flash of genuine fear. The article detailed every aspect of Victoria's campaign against her, presented not as victimhood, but as an anthropological study of how successful women sometimes used their power to police other women's choices. This is quite detailed, Victoria said carefully, trying to maintain her composure in front of her audience. I believe in thorough research, Diana replied. James Rodriguez has been incredibly helpful in verifying all the facts. You remember James, don't you? He used to handle Marcus's legal affairs before you had him blacklisted from your social circle. At the mention of James's name, Victoria's facade cracked slightly. James had inside knowledge of Victoria's charitable activities from his years, representing Marcus's business interests. If he was working with Diana, it meant trouble. Ladies, James appeared at Diana's elbow as if summoned, impeccably dressed and carrying himself with the quiet authority of someone who held powerful cards. I hope you're all enjoying the evening. Victoria, I particularly wanted to thank you for tonight's event. It's provided the perfect opportunity for some important announcements. Victoria's entourage shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension but not understanding its source. Diana noticed several of them glancing between Victoria and James with growing confusion. What kind of announcements? Asked Helen Morrison, one of Victoria's closest allies and a fellow board member of 3 different charities. James smiled pleasantly. Well, the Arizona Republic will be running a fascinating investigation next week about nonprofit governance and accountability. Diana's story about being targeted for her relationship choices was just the tip of the iceberg. The real story is about how certain individuals have been using charitable organizations for personal enrichment. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup, and Helen Morrison looked like she might be sick. Diana realized that several other women in their group were board members who had likely been complicit in Victoria's schemes. I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria said, but her voice lacked its usual commanding tone. Of course not, James replied smoothly. Though I'm sure the State Attorney General's office will be very thorough in their investigation. They're particularly interested in the Desert Wildlife Foundation's consulting contracts. Fascinating how many of those contracts went to companies owned by board members' family members. Diana watched as the implications sank in around the group. Victoria's power had always been built on her ability to reward loyalty and punish opposition through her network of charitable boards and social influence. If that network was compromised, if her activities were exposed, her entire foundation of power would crumble. You can't prove anything, Victoria said, but it came out as a desperate whisper rather than a confident assertion. Actually, Diana said gently, we already have financial records, email communications, witness statements from vendors who were pressured to inflate invoices. It's all documented. James has been very thorough. The circle of women around Victoria began to edge away, their survival instincts kicking in as they realized they were witnessing a complete reversal of power. The woman they'd followed, whose approval they'd courted, whose enemies they'd attacked, was suddenly revealed as vulnerable and exposed. Marcus had remained silent throughout the exchange, but now he stepped closer to Diana, his presence a clear statement of solidarity. "Victoria," he said quietly, "this ends now. No more attacks on Diana. No more manipulation of our kids. No more using your influence to hurt people who've done nothing wrong." Victoria looked around desperately, seeking support from her former allies, but found only averted gazes and uncomfortable silence. The social queen bee was suddenly alone in her hive. "This isn't over," Victoria said, but the words rang hollow. She turned and walked away, her entourage scattering rather than following. Diana felt a profound sense of completion wash over her. This confrontation represented so much more than defeating Victoria Sterling. It was about refusing to be diminished, refusing to apologize for taking up space, refusing to let others define her worth based on their own insecurities and prejudices. As the evening continued, Diana found herself surrounded by people who wanted to congratulate her, support her, learn from her. The article she'd published that morning had already been shared thousands of times, with women across the country thanking her for giving voice to their own experiences of being policed and punished for claiming their power. Rachel appeared, at her side, radiant with pride. "I can't believe you pulled this off. You've completely changed the conversation about what it means to start over in midlife." "It wasn't just me," Diana said, looking around at the crowd that had gathered. "It was every woman who refused to stay silent, every person who believed that age doesn't disqualify you from joy or desire or ambition." Sophie, her daughter, pushed through the crowd with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I am so proud of you. I was wrong to be embarrassed about your transformation. You've shown me what real strength looks like." The embrace that followed was worth every moment of doubt, every sleepless night, every attack Victoria had launched. Diana had not only reclaimed her own life, but had shown her daughter that women don't expire at 50, that reinvention is possible. At any age, that standing up for yourself is always worth the cost. As the evening wound down, Diana and Marcus walked through the garden's moonlit paths, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the desert plants that had learned to thrive in harsh conditions. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them. "So, what's next?" Marcus asked, his arm around her waist as they paused near a blooming night cereus, its white flowers opening only in darkness. Diana considered the question. Her online platform was growing exponentially. The book offers were serious and substantial. Speaking engagements were being requested by organizations across the country. But more than any external success, she had something infinitely more valuable. She had herself back. "Next, I keep growing," she said simply. "I keep telling women that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. I keep showing up authentically, taking up space, refusing to shrink to make others comfortable." Marcus smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. "And we keep building something together?" "We keep building something together," Diana confirmed, but with the understanding that their relationship was now between two whole people, not a woman trying to complete herself through someone else's approval. 3 months later, Diana's book, Blooming at 50, A Guide to Fearless Midlife Reinvention, would hit the bestseller lists. Victoria Sterling would quietly resign from her board positions and largely disappear from Phoenix society. Sophie would change her major to women's studies, inspired by her mother's journey. Rachel would start her own blog about friendship and support during life transitions. But on this perfect November evening in the desert botanical garden, surrounded by plants that had mastered the art of thriving where others thought nothing could grow, Diana Chen simply stood in her own power and marveled at the woman she had become. At 52, she hadn't just discovered whether she still had it, She'd discovered that she had something far more valuable than external validation. She had herself, completely and unapologetically, and that was more than enough. The desert wind stirred through the garden, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the promise of new growth. Diana breathed deeply, smiled at the man beside her, and looked forward to whatever came next. After all, she was just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.